Hi, this is Christian Chase with Chase Real Estate and ChaseForeclosure.com. Hey, I wanted to talk to our investors about rental real estate, specifically Section 8, RHSP, government programs that are available for investors. And number one, discuss all the benefits about using it. And then two, dispel some of the misconceptions that are out there that everybody talks about. For 20 plus years, I've personally been renting out real estate using these government programs. My clients, we've rented thousands of properties using these different government programs and working those to our benefit. About 70% of our investors buy, fix, and sell real estate. 30% of our investors buy, fix, and hold real estate. And the government programs that are available is something I think all of our investors should take advantage of. And the reason being is I personally do it, and it's truly made me a millionaire and my clients millionaires. And now I'm starting to sound a little guru-y, but it's a fact. It's made us a lot of money over many years. And I would like our investors to take advantage of this and not automatically go, this isn't going to work, or I heard from Joe that this isn't a good program, or it's a nightmare, and all those things, which it can be, but I'm going to explain to you how it won't be if you just follow these few little simple steps that we have. But these programs have absolutely changed all of our lives. I have a lot of clients that call me on a regular basis. Hey, Christian, all the rental properties, I paid off all my kids' college with the rental properties I had. Now I want to sell the property. Everything is, I'm done with all the college. We're going to go out and retire. And so many of my clients have seen benefits from this. And it truly is a great way to go. The one thing is, when I first started in real estate in 1995, I was buying, fixing, flipping houses. And then I'm like, hey, I want to own rental real estate. It's just something that I wanted to do. So in 97, I started buying rentals. And I got into about 3 properties. And I'm like, okay, I got all these rented out. Then I started to think, I'm like, all right, what happens if these tenants don't pay me on the monthly basis, and I start to acquire 5, 10, 15, 20 properties, I'm going to be in a real world of hurt. And so very quickly, I started to investigate and learn about the different government programs, which are essentially like guaranteed rent. If you're a good landlord, you're going to get the rent on a regular basis. So I started to implement Section 8 into all of the properties that I have, and still to this day, almost every single property I own, and I own a lot of real estate, is under a government program of some sort. But I did that because the way that I look at Section 8 is like, I have insurance on my property in case my property burns down. I have Section 8 on my properties in case my tenants don't pay me rent. It's a program where it makes me feel very comfortable to continue to expand your business and feel very comfortable, and not only make you feel comfortable, make your bank, who's going to be making you more loans to build your portfolio up, makes them feel very comfortable that they know that you have X number of dollars coming in from the federal government, direct deposit into your account. So it's something that it works in so many different ways. To me, it's like one big insurance policy on my investment. I've got insurance in case it burns down, and I got insurance to make sure that the rent comes in. So I feel very, very comfortable with my portfolio, and then it gave me the ability to continue to expand and buy 50, 60 homes, at one time, and have them all owned and rented. And ultimately, my tenants were all paying my rents, and I was paying these properties down. So the next part I wanted to talk about is the misconceptions. That's a big thing that's out there, is what people say about Section 8. And I'm going to tell you, why that's false, how not to have those issues, and what you can do if there is an issue. Who do you contact? And this is going to be a good, simple trick for you. Okay, all about misconceptions. So many investors tell me, they're like, oh no, Section 8's a nightmare, and they're going to trash my property. And I'm sure that does happen, and it can. And there's one way I can guarantee you that your property will get trashed. Be a lousy landlord. Treat the tenant like you're doing them a favor. And so many investors, to me, they're like, oh, I don't need to take care of the tenant. They're getting their money from the government. Whoa, hold on, time out. This tenant is paying you, whether they get their funds from out of their pocket or it's being direct deposited from the federal government. That's your client. And we can never, ever forget that's your client. And so many investors that have bad experiences with Section 8 get into the mindset that they're doing the tenant a favor by renting the property to them. No, you're not doing them a favor. You have a client. You absolutely need to take care of that client, just like you would, or I would with my client that's buying a property from me. So the second you forget that, that's when everything goes sideways. These are humans. They need hot water. They need heat and air conditioning. We need to provide those things. That's critical. And as some investors, I think, sometimes miss that point. And when they do miss that, that's where the tenant gets angry. And they're not going to take care of your property because you're not taking care of the property. They're going to do what you do. You don't react to something, they're not going to react to something. So the biggest issue is really the landlord. It's not the tenant, because we can do the application on a tenant. We can do all the credit checks, and we can do background checks and criminal checks and all that stuff on the tenant. But what it really boils down to is the tenant is a good, solid tenant that's inside the property. It's how are you tending to the tenant and to the property. But let's say you do have a tenant that's inside the property and it's on a Section 8, on the Section 8 program. And the tenant isn't paying their small portion, or you're getting calls from a neighbor that they're being rowdy out at night. All right. So, first and foremost, on how do you interact with the tenant is critical. Letters to the tenant, I think, are very important. In a respectful way. It's kind of like, hey, we've got this one complaint. Can you get this taken care of? Don't go at it in some angry manner. You wouldn't do that to anybody on their first shot. All right, so now it's the second time I've got an issue. Now it's going to get a little bit more firm. And then the third shot, your third strike, essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach out to the tenant. I'm going to send them a letter. Hey, you're causing a lot of noise. I'm getting a lot of complaints from the neighbors that are in the area. And I'm also going to carbon copy their caseworker. So the tenant's going to get the letter. The caseworker is going to get the letter to say that, hey, there's an issue at the property. So I'm putting the tenant and their caseworker on notice that there is an issue at this property and the tenant needs to fix something. Now, likely what's going to happen is the caseworker is not going to reach out to me, the landlord. They're going to reach out to the tenant and say, hey, you need to be making sure that you're abiding by the lease and taking care of the property and being a good tenant. Otherwise, you have the potential of losing your voucher, the ability how they get paid to live inside the property. So nobody wants that. So the secret little tip is, whenever there is a issue at the property, make sure that you're communicating with the tenant and their caseworker at the same time, and make sure both know that they're being carbon copied on that. And I would say 99% of your problems will disappear if you're communicating that way with the tenant and with the caseworker on a property. So that's a great tip. I've used that for decades now, and I don't want confrontation. I don't want to argue or anything like that. I want to provide good quality housing to my tenant, and to be able to do that, I'm going to absolutely need that property to be maintained in a certain fashion. So that's the biggest misconception, is that your property is going to get trashed. And I really think that it boils down to it's the landlord. You're going to always have a bad tenant, but if I had a regular fair market tenant that's out there, I'm going to have one bad tenant out of a bunch. That's inevitable. That's just going to happen. And the idea then is that you move forward and move on to having another tenant. So what I really wanted to talk about next is a little bit about how the Section 8 program works, the bedrooms, bathrooms, and the zip codes and the amounts that they're paid, and we'll do that on the Section 8 overview. All right, a quick little overview on Section 8 and how it works. It's a bedroom zip code based system. So if you think of it this way, you have a property located in Homewood, Illinois, and it's a 3-bedroom home in zip code 60430. So now there's going to be certain tenants who have a voucher or a dollar amount allotted from the federal government, are going to have a bedroom count voucher with a dollar amount associated with it. So if I have a property in Homewood, every single housing authority that exists has kind of a payment schedule. And it's going to say a 3-bedroom voucher will get $2,000 in this particular zip code. So all we need to do is just look up and find out how much the voucher amounts are for that particular area. And I would say that the rents on the Section 8 program specifically are very close to what fair market rents would be going for. Sometimes it's a little bit more, sometimes it's a little bit less, but they always seem to fall right in the zone of where rents are currently. But under that program. Now, the one thing that you need to know is a tenant may say to you, I have a $2,000 voucher for a 3-bedroom. Well, yeah, they do. They're vouchers for $2,000, but if you, the landlord, are requiring the tenant pay for certain utilities, so on a lot of single-family homes, the tenant's responsible for gas, water, electric, lawn care, sewer, garbage, you name it. If it's a tenant's responsibility, off that $2,000 that they're being paid, we need to do what we call a utility backout. There's another schedule that they have for each individual housing authority, which will show you for a 3-bedroom, the electric every month needs to be reduced by $25. The rent of $2,000 needs to be reduced by $25. And so I would say on average, it's about $200 to $250 in reductions. So if it was a $2,000 a month rent, I do the utility backout. If the tenant's paying for pretty much everything, I'm going to be collecting around $1,750 in rent on that property. So that's kind of how the rents are determined. The tenant has that voucher. They're issued a voucher. They're typically on a waiting list to get a voucher. They get the voucher, then they need to find housing in a certain period of time so that they don't lose that voucher. And now, writing up leases and things like that, that's our leasing department. They handle all of that, and our property management's in charge of raising up rents or doing rent increases on properties. But for the most part, what you really need to know that it's bedroom based on zip code, and the vouchers are paid out accordingly to that, and that there always will be a utility backout if the tenant's responsible for any of the utilities. And that's something that we're more than happy to help explain to you and show you on paper what it would work out on a particular property. It's very, very simple. Again, I've been doing this, the rental end of things for 20 plus years, so I pretty much should know these in my head, but they change every year. So, and they tend to always go up. That's what's nice. I don't really see any reduction in how much they pay out on these properties. So, but that's one of the biggest things. But what I wanted to do is also get into is talking about some of the financing on these properties and how I've used Section 8 and the benefits, again, with using government programs and getting financing. Okay, now if you're going to be financing a property, which I would encourage all of our investors to do if you're buying rentals, do not pay cash for rental properties unless you're going to refinance it right away. But I mean, there are the strategies which we're all familiar with, the BRRRR strategy or the BRRRR V2 strategy on doing the rental or the financing on these properties. It's very, very easy to get financing to purchase the property. and then to go ahead and do a cash out refinance, or if we're using the BRRRR V2 strategy, you're getting your money up front whenever you buy the property. And that's another video in a completely different section. And again, if you have any questions, you always call me on that. I'll be more than happy to explain the BRRRR V2. But the financing, when you're financing a rental property, the objective is we're trying to build up a portfolio. It's not like we want to buy one house and rent it out. We want to buy lots of houses with the same money, keep reinvesting to buy more. And the biggest thing, and I said this a little bit earlier, is that the banks, when you're going to go get financing to buy these properties or refinance the property, your bank's going to look at where that money is coming from. One, is the property occupied? Is there a tenant in there? Okay, if it's a fair market tenant, they're like, great, you got the property filled and the tenant's living inside the property, that's great. But to put icing on the cake, it's if you have the property and it is rented on a government program, your banker's going to look at that and they're going to say, hey, holy cow, this is like insurance, that you're going to get the rent every single month. As long as you're a good landlord, you're going to go get the rent every single month on this property. So their risk is minimized whenever you're working with a Section 8 tenant. So that, again, keeps the building of your portfolio, and it makes it just that much more easy because you've got your banker 100% on your side saying, hey, we've got ourselves covered here. We've got insurance in case the property burns down, and we've got insurance in case the tenants don't pay rent. So that essentially is what the program and how the banks look at it is that it's an insurance policy to make sure that the bank is going to get repaid. You're going to get repaid, and but the banks love that. But if you want to build up a portfolio of real estate, and just like me in the very beginning, I needed to feel comfortable building this portfolio. I didn't want to put myself all out there and get wiped out if for some reason 10 of my properties and 10 of my tenants decided not to pay that month. That would have broke me in the beginning, where now having Section 8, I felt very, very comfortable taking on, doing a refinance, getting my cash back, taking those funds, reinvesting it into another property, and so on and so forth. So this gives you the ability, Section 8 gives you the ability to keep moving forward and build that portfolio and feel very comfortable and have your bank feel comfortable just as much as you. And they're just as important as you are in the whole process because they're the ones that are able to keep lending and keep the business moving forward. So what I'd also like to talk about is the areas of where we're buying properties, why we're buying properties in those areas, and that's going to be a very important part. Location, location, location. Okay, where do you buy these properties? Where are the areas to buy? And I'm one that's always bought in A, B, C locations. I tend to try to buy in as good of an area as I can possibly buy properties in. I've met a lot of investors over a lot of years who say they always want to buy properties in the D's or the F's because they get great cash flow on properties. And hands down, you do get great cash flow. Year number one, you get great cash flow. Every year thereafter, you're going to have tenant turnover and tenants wanting to move into my properties because they don't want to live in that area with, that maybe has higher crime or bad schools or whatever that may be. That's one of the reasons why I try to go after the higher quality areas, the A, B, C locations, and I'll take a little bit less in cash flow because I know that the turnover is going to be so much less in those areas. And to use an example, I met a hedge fund, I want to say it was back in 2010, sitting exactly where I'm sitting at right now, and they came in and they, their grand plan, they spilled it all out on the table for me. This is what we're going to do. And they were solely looking at the cash flow on the properties. And I'm like, guys, year one, it's going to look great. Everything will be perfect on this year one, but years 2, 3, and 4 are going to be dismal. It's going to be a nightmare because all your tenants are going to be moving out. Not only what happens when a tenant moves out, you got great cash flow on year one, but year 2, the tenant moves out, you may have, because it's in a lesser of an area, the property may not be as well maintained. So now I got to go in and rehab the property. I've got vacancy on the property. And my vacancy probably is going to be a little bit longer because I got to fill in a D or F area. So there's a few things that really come into play that I think a lot of these big companies that were out there that were buying this, or even a lot of small investors go, hey, this is spinning off great cash flow monthly. But I'm like, yeah, on paper it does. But is it really putting out cash flow over the long run? When we buy a rental property, our intention is to own it for probably 10 years. So I want that property, I want my tenant moving in and never moving out of my property. And I have a lot of tenants that have been inside my properties for over a decade. And those are Section 8 tenants. And so what I would say is that I'm trying to buy in those A and B locations or C locations, get my tenant into the property, give them a nice quality product, nice and clean. And so once they move in, if they wanted to move out of my property, they're not even going to be able to move laterally. They would have to move down in the market into a lesser area, lesser property. So my strategy has always been is to try to get a tenant in, get them moved into the property, and get them to stay as long as possible, doing slight rent increases yearly, not to get them to move out of the property. If they're a good tenant, obviously, I want to keep them there. So I think it's really, really important that you're buying specifically in the right locations and not just looking at cash flow solely. I mean, cash flow's got to come into play here. I'm just willing to take a little bit less in cash flow to get into a better real estate market, because over the next 10 years, I'm going to have way more profit on that particular property than that investor that's buying in those areas. And like I said, that hedge fund, they ended up buying in those areas that were like the D's and F's. They switched gears. It was about 2 years after their whole gear switched up, and they were in Plainfield, where I own a ton of real estate, and buying properties there right in my backyard. And it kind of felt good because I was right for once. So, but it's really, really important that you do know the areas. And a lot of properties that we're buying right now, I would say in 2022 and likely into 2023 is going to be the in the south suburbs. And the reason being is that we have a lot of tenants. I get a lot of applications that come over for our properties that are located in the south suburbs, in Homewood or Flossmoor or Olympia Fields. And the biggest reason we have on our application, well, why are you moving? And they're like, I need to be in a much safer area. And a lot of the tenants are coming out of the city and they're moving into the south suburbs. And so they're trying to get into that better area as a result. So that's one of the strategies is definitely south suburbs. I would say in Lake County, the northern part of Illinois, Antioch and those areas, Gurnee, we're buying properties there. We just really got to watch the taxes closely in some of those markets. As we do always, whenever we're looking at any investment property, and that falls into this discussion about area. Every area is going to be a little bit different. The townships and what the tax rates are, and we're able to navigate our way through. But that's something we have to look at on every property. Do the taxes work to make the cash flow work on that particular property? So that's something we're automatically looking at whenever we're proposing a property to our investors as a rental. Do the taxes work versus the rents that are collected? And just because the taxes are high doesn't mean that the property doesn't work, because the rents in that particular area may be way up there in rent price. So your taxes are high, but so is the rent price for the area. It's all kind of relative, It's like it's the same thing with like the pricing on housing, and I think once you start to learn that a little bit, it's that becomes the case. But if it's an area, I could use an example in the south suburbs. I love Park Forest. It's a great town. And but sometimes that doesn't work. I might have a small 3-bedroom house and the taxes are $6,000 as a rental. That one may not work because the rent may not match what it would be. But we do rent out properties in Park Forest as well. So I'm not poo-pooing every area here. There's a lot of areas that we do buy properties in, but we just have to be look a little bit more with a fine-tooth comb on those particular properties, area-wise. So But again, areas, a critical thing, just float in those A, B, C areas. You'll get longer term tenants. They can't move laterally typically. They would have to move down in property and area, and as a result, you'll have a long-term tenant. So what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the market in general. You know, when you're buying these properties, you just have to look at the market as a whole when you're doing a buy, fix, and rent strategy. You know, we continue to do the buy, fix, and sell stuff, and I always will. I just have so many investors that I talk to. I'm like, hey, you know, you're looking at buying or building a portfolio of rental real estate, and they say, no, you know, I'm not going to do the Section 8 program. And I sometimes I just don't know why, and that's the purpose of this video, is to explain why it's probably one of the best programs that exists that's out there. So in our real estate market, Section 8 is applicable anywhere from the Wisconsin border to the Indiana border and everything in between. And I think what's really cool with us is that not only do we have like foreclosure, distressed properties that we're able to buy under market, we have the rehab teams, we have the bankers that know you're renting it out on Section 8, that are willing to do the purchase on the property, willing to do the refinance or the cash out refinance on the property. And then we have the leasing team. We have a whole leasing team in place to help you, one, get the property listed for rent, do all the application with the tenants, show the property, get the property, do the background checks and criminal checks and write up the lease and all of those things. Our leasing team does that. They charge 1 month's rent to get these properties rented out. And I would say that they are hands down an expert in Section 8 specifically, or RHSP, or any of these government programs. We've got a ton of experience amongst all of us. I mean, you know, 100 years, I don't know what it is, but it's a lot of years of all of us doing this. And we know the programs. We know caseworkers at the housing authorities. They know us. I think that they tend to like us because I think we're putting quality properties on the market. We have quality investors that are buying these properties. And I think it's a like mindset, you know, like we understand that our tenant is our client. And so the housing authorities like that because we're treating the tenants with respect. And so that's something that I think is very, very important, is having a good leasing team that's in place, that's doing everything for you. In this case, I think you should step back a little bit, let the leasing team do their thing. They know what they're doing on getting these properties rented. Once the property is rented, though, then you have to decide as an investor, do you personally want to manage these properties, or do you want to hire our property manager to do the property management on the property? And so we have, we have both things. We can get the properties leased for you, but then we also have property management that's in place that will manage these properties. So if there is any tenant issues or, a non-payment or something to that effect, we're able to take care of all of that for our investors. In the very beginning, when I was doing this, I was managing all my own real estate. And I'd say, hey, if you've only got a few homes, do it yourself in the beginning, just so you can learn what's actually involved in the process. Then you know what the costs are. Then when you turn it over to somebody, you feel very confident writing a check to them, for the property management, instead of saying, well, I don't know what's all involved. Why did he say we need to do this or do that? If you don't have the experience, that's the one issue that you could run into. But our property manager handles everything. We'll manage the property, work on all the rent increases on the property every year for you. So if you hire a property manager, within about 3 years, they pay for themselves. Meaning that, if you do it yourself and you don't raise the rents every year on the property because you're like, oh, I'm just going to extend the lease, which a lot of investors do. Surprisingly, more than not, and I'm guilty of it as well. I got a good tenant and I'm like, I don't want to rock the boat, but they're going to raise the rents for you every year. They'll end up paying for themselves probably in about 3 years. So it's like you got free property management after 3 years. because they're doing all of those things that you and I tend to neglect to do if we're self-managing our properties. And then if you start to get a lot of property, that's where you really need to stay on top of your property, because that's where you go from good landlord to bad landlord, because you're not responding quick enough. And that's where things can go sideways on these properties. So, the biggest thing for me is, I kind of always look at it as there's always these points, and I've always kind of walked around whenever I'm buying a piece of real estate, and I'm like, and I look at my hand, and I'm like, I always want cash flow on a property. I'm like, all right, does the property cash flow? I'm not talking about killer cash flow or I'm cleaning up. Does it cash flow on a monthly basis? Am I paying down the principal on the property? Am I paying down the principal on that particular property? Okay, those are two criteria. Am I getting tax advantages by owning this property? Yes. Okay. And then essentially a lot of investors, I look at the guaranteed rent. That's one of the criteria for me. I want to make sure I've got guaranteed rent. And in addition to that, I always want to have appreciation. Now, this is like the bonus, that's the cherry on top, is the appreciation. That's never factored into this entire equation, is appreciation. I hope for it, okay? And I've always got it, but I don't budget for it. So I'm looking for those things. I want 5 things on every property, and the 5th item is the cherry on top. When I get it down the road, is the appreciation on the property. I guess I would say the most important thing to me would be the principal reduction. All my tenants are paying off all my real estate. That's essentially what this is. I own it. I buy it. I get it fixed up. I buy it under market to start. And then I get it rented, rehabbed, rented. I refinance it. I get my cash back. I go out and I buy another property and do the same thing all over again. So that's been my whole strategy out of all the years of doing this. And I encourage our investors to entertain this. Maybe don't start out with 10 houses that are under government programs. Start out with 1 and just get to learn the program. And we're going to be there to guide you along the way. We've all done this. Everyone here in my office that's doing this stuff is actively doing it as an investor themselves. And I think that says something, is that they're not just selling it, they're actually doing it. That's part of their retirement. That's their financial plan, and they're incorporating that specifically into their lives. And that to me tells me that we're doing something right. And I know by changing this many people's lives, and I kid you not, it's phone calls all the time. Christian, I paid off my kids' college. Thanks for getting me into those properties. Did I do anything special? No, I didn't. All I did was say, hey, I'm doing this, and pointing them in the right direction, and I'd like to do the same thing for you. I really genuinely think it can change your life. It changed my life. It changed a lot of lives around me, a lot of my clients' lives, and that at the end of the day is what this is all about. So, and we're able to do it in an ethical way and in a respectful way of the tenants, and I kind of feel like then it becomes a win-win-win. And when it's a win-win-win, it's a good thing, and you'll continue to do that for many, many years. So, as always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to give me a call. And as always, check out our website, chaseforeclosure.com, and check out our website, chaserental.com. I've got a lot more details on Chase Rental about our rental process. So, thanks again for tuning in.